This is a presentation of SBE 15, New York City.
I'm going to send it over to our host for the evening, which is Kirk Harnack from the Telos Alliance. And welcome, Kirk, to New York City. I know you had to fly here from Nashville. So welcome, and we made it extra sunny for you here.
And I'd love to hold questions till the end, but if somebody's got an urgent question, they just can't wait, just butt right in, and that's okay. Good deal. And I want to be a huge thanks to Dave Kirsten and Shane Finch with Broadcaster General Store for making the arrangements along with Jeff to get me up here. And it's been a pleasure to be with them. It always is. And so thank you very much, Shane and Dave. I appreciate you very much. I must tell you, this is the first time I've given this exact presentation. So haven't had a lot of time to rehearse it. I spent a lot of time putting it together, but we're going to see how it goes. And, you know, I may bumble a little bit, but we'll see how it goes. And yeah, we had a complicated title. The title of this thing was Radio and IT, Getting Married, Kids on the Way, Moving into a New House. And there is some sensibility to this title. And that is that, you know, radio and IT, have been dating for quite a while, and there's some real serious talk about getting married and moving in the same house together. So we're going to look at kind of how that works. I'm going to give you some short insights into containerized software. Is all that so important? I just want you to know that we're not talking about running an app on a Windows machine. I'm not even talking about virtual machines, really. We're talking about containerized software, which I've met several IT people in the last year and a half, and I've asked them, I mean, these are hardcore, data center IT people. And I've asked them, are you guys using container technology yet to run, your insurance company, your banking business, your healthcare industry? And they said, well, yeah, of course, that's what we do. It's all containers now in our place. So, well, okay. The company that I've worked for, Telos Alliance, we kind of looked at containers and thought, this is probably where we ought to go. This is the reliability and the flexibility that broadcasters are going to want to have. So why are broadcasters moving to standardized IT container? And we asked the question, as Steve Church so often did, what if? What if broadcast equipment were really apps on a server? What if you could install or turn it off in minutes? What if you paid for it, to some degree, only when you need to use it? What if you could literally control it from anywhere? Because, hey, when you're on your banking app, you're controlling your account from anywhere, right? Well, why can't we do that with radio? Why can't I do my radio show from anywhere where I can arrange for a quality microphone and a way to hear what I'm doing? That'd be kind of interesting. Home office, other offices, sports venues, live remotes, broadcast equipment as server-based, applications. They can be moved around at will or at necessity. They can provide low-cost redundancy. They can be used for disaster recovery, and brick and mortar's not so much required. Of course, you can have it. In fact, most people I talk to about implementing containerized broadcast functionality want to do it in their own brick and mortar place. They're already paying for it. They just need to, upgrade their servers and their power supplies and internet connections, things like that, so that they have the kind of reliability that they might approach from a data center. So specifically, what if your audio console, your on-air phone system, your audio processing, your broadcast intercoms, what if those could be spun up in minutes if you needed to? Or of course, they could be operating for years. Controlled from anywhere, controlled from any device with a browser, deployed on premises or in the cloud, and give you automated redundancy, not redundancy where you've got to go type a bunch of stuff, but hey, this server fails and all of a sudden it starts using a different server, and all I know about it is there may have been a tiny glitch on the air, and I got an email that says, by the way, we're on server 12 today instead of server 11 because we're gonna have to do some service on server 11. Well, here's a little brief clip of Marty Sachs about our industry adopting this kind of technology.
Broadcasters have been successful at repurposing tech from the equipment industry, the telecom world, and the computing sector. Now we're once again adopting proven virtualization technologies that are already having a positive impact on our content and our bottom line.
So I want to introduce you to a couple of my colleagues. Greg Shea is the CTO at Telos Alliance. and Jake Alderman is our Virtual Solutions Program Manager. Got a couple of short clips from each of them here describing the technology and why broadcasters may want to look at this. Cutting right to the chase here, Jake Alderman answers the obvious question: why should broadcasters, particularly station owners and managers, why should they care about this tech that we're presenting here?
Being able to centralize your software deployments onto a few servers versus multiple racks of hardware appliances is more cost effective. You're not paying for, compute resources that maybe go unused on a hardware appliance because a container only occupies the compute space it needs. So you might go from a physical footprint of 7 or 10 racks down to 3 or 4. That's less power, less cooling, less square footage that's needed. Those are all, ultimately things that benefit our bottom line. The other reason is uptime and ease of maintenance. Once you're in a software environment, you're able to shift your workload around. That means higher uptime, less impact to customers, less things that get noticed when we're doing technical work in the back end. And so it's the balancing point of you're going to save money because your square footage and your power draw goes down, but also you're going to have a greater uptime than needing to buy, 2 of a physical appliance, because I can just move the instance of software from one server to another while I take one down for maintenance.
And the next question might be, well, why should we, as broadcast engineers, why should we care about moving into a virtualized broadcast infrastructure?
I think the general gist for most broadcast engineers is we want to be able to automate as much of our workflow today as possible, not to remove us from our jobs, but to support us in our jobs. The job of the engineer is constantly getting broader and more complex, especially as we move to people working from home more commonly. And so the ability to have failover that's transparent, meaning we know about it, but also automatic, so we don't have to think about it, is the ultimate benefit for us as engineers. Knowing that, hey, one of my servers is down, but my other 2 servers took over the workload from my server that's offline right now, is the ultimate dream for an engineer. I don't have to lose sleep. I don't have to get woken up, because, hey, Studio A went down. Studio A moved on to another machine, and the talent who's sitting in Studio A doesn't even know that we're running from somewhere else. That's the dream, I think, for most of us as broadcast engineers.
Most of us have heard of, and many have installed and used applications that run on virtual machines. And this technology has been around for literally over 40 years now. Virtual machine technology really made popular in the early 2000s when multi-core CPUs became available. A more recent development, though, is containerized software, and a popular standard is known as Docker, although Docker now fits into a standard called the OCI standard. It doesn't need a whole virtual machine to run. Rather, the software containers are executed by a Docker engine that itself uses the resources of one single underlying operating system. Now, if virtual machines and software containers both do kind of the same thing in the end, what are the key differences between these topologies? And Greg Shea explains that.
Why virtual machines and containers? Why do we have both? And why would you want to use containers versus virtual machines? Well, the short answer to that is, if you've ever set up a virtual machine, there's a number of things you have to configure and click on and things to think about, virtual peripherals. It's rather like setting up if you bought a new computer. A container is trying to achieve the same goal, that you don't have to buy another physical computer. You want to be able to run the software independently, the installation being independent, so you don't have a conflict between other stuff that's on that computer. You want this place that's the container to run the software that you want to run. And the difference is, with containers, it is a more limited set of stuff that you have to set up. In fact, it's also designed to be automatable so that you don't have all those choices to make about all the peripherals and all those various things of setting up about a virtual machine. So a virtual machine is more comfortable if you're thinking in terms of setting up a whole computer and a whole environment for a piece of software. But a container is a very strategically designed piece of a virtual environment that allows you to run the software that you want to run with a minimum of other stuff, a minimum of overhead to worry about. So it's kind of more of a contained package, thus container.
Containerized software looks to be the future of computing services. My own anecdotal evidence of, meeting other IT guys, literally on the putt-putt golf course, but meeting guys, talking to them. And they're really good for microservices. Microservices and containers are the industry future trend for software. If you sent me some money right now with PayPal, it's containers that are doing that. If you check your bank balance or send money to somebody, if so many things you do, they're actually executed with containers and no longer being executed with regular virtual machines. They're used by Google, Amazon, Visa, PayPal, MetLife, lots of companies for executing tasks. One difference, though, that we're going to be kind of figuring out is that for live real-time audio, well, that's a little bit different task than transaction processing, because our transactions never stop, right? They just keep going and going and going. We keep doing math over and over again on the data that's coming in and the data that we're going to be putting out. So that's one difference. Whereas if you've got an IT person that says, "Oh yeah, I know all about containers," well, you may not know all about containers that have to do something all the time without stop and without fail. So we're learning a new technical concept here, and one that may take some thought to wrap your head around. We asked Jake to take a stab at answering a key question: what exactly is container software? And I think he nails it with this answer.
Containerized software is a new method for deploying software in a more lightweight manner. So traditionally, we had applications that installed onto an operating system and would run on your desktop computer or a server. And we're all used to those in the broadcast environment now. And in the last 10 years or so, we've started to see some people use virtual machines, and that's taking a physical piece of hardware and making a virtual version of the computer, installing the operating system, and then installing the application on top of that operating system. Containers are a middle ground between those two. What we're able to do is, instead of virtualizing the whole machine, we're able to create an isolated place to just install the software we need, like an audio console or a phone system. And so what we do instead is we share the operating system, but we have this isolated bucket so our audio console doesn't touch anything else. And it's not actually called a bucket, it's called a container. So you've got your container that holds your one application in isolation, similar to a VM or a physical computer, but it's able to share the resources of that greater compute platform.
So visually, graphically, here's how container software fits within a compute platform. Underlying everything is, of course, a bare metal hardware. Typically, this is going to be a server grade computer with multiple CPU cores and dozens of gigabytes of RAM and enough disk drive space to hold the operating systems and the containers, and server style hardware goodies like dual power supplies, extra cooling fans, several network interfaces, some supervisory hardware. In the more straightforward instance, we'd have a Linux operating system installed in the bare metal computer. And then within Linux, we're going to install a Docker engine on there. And that engine is going to service and support the containers that we install above that. And at the moment, at least our company, Telos Alliance, we can do phone systems, we can do an intercom system, and we can do mixing consoles. We're just about to bring out, we'll show it at NAB, audio processing in a container as well. And following crawl, walk, run, the first audio processor is for streaming applications. We do have some companies installing literally hundreds and hundreds of those. And then along later will come FM and processing that's appropriate for your FM transmission. It looks like some very large companies are taking a lot of their infrastructure, or they're staking a lot of the infrastructure, I should say, on containerized software. And again, I'm asking the question, is this really going to affect us as broadcast engineers? I don't know about you, but there's been a lot of technologies come along, and I don't feel like I have time and effort to learn about each and every one of them. I got to focus on the stuff that I'm going to be using or expect to know about. So this is what Jake talks about here.
It really concerns us because it's an emerging technology that has so many plus sides for how we deploy and manipulate software. VMs can be expensive for the software they run on and to actually run virtual machines. Physical hardware has a hard cost for us to cope with. And so at some point, you're probably going to be making the bridge from buying physical appliances to buying software that's going to be deployed, and whether it's, a console or a phone system today, or in, 2 or 3 years, you're looking to have a facility refresh, it's important to start getting the education to follow along the train here. It's not a tomorrow I have to step out and, go take a week off and get a certification on this, but it is something it's worth taking an hour a month if you've got that time in your schedule to do your education, to have some continuing education in this area.
Well, let's look closer at one use of container technology. And in this example, I think we can all identify with it's mixing technology. So let's just look at a typical AOIP type of setup. We'll have a core Ethernet switch. We'll add some inputs and outputs devices to that. In our case, it'll be X nodes. We add a PC that's running an IP audio driver. So you've got audio in and out of that automation PC. And then here's the console, and here's a mixing engine. So the console, it's kind of like a mouse that happens to look like an audio console. And the mix engine just follows the direction of what the console tells it to do, to subscribe to this channel, that channel, mix them together at these levels, perform this processing on it, and send it back out as, program 1, program 2. So we're all pretty familiar with this kind of setup. We can now, now that we've got inputs and outputs on the network, we can pretty easily add other stuff to the network. Like this is an IQX console. It's got the mixing engine, happens to be built into it. You may want to add some more input and output like local microphone, but you can add that to the network and, add a bunch of functionality just by plugging one thing into the network. Now, what if you replaced that hardware console with some software? And so for actually quite a few years now, Telos Alliance has been making some things that can control a mixing engine like this. There's third-party software, IP Studio from a guy in France that is just all over France with that stuff. For a long time, we've had Soft Surface, and you can even make a mixer using our Pathfinder software. You can make your own little mixers with that. Well, here's the first time you've heard this word probably, and that is Axia Altus. This is a software container audio mixing console, and we'll look at more of it in a few minutes. In fact, I've even got some early testimonial stories from some people who are actually using it. One of the guys you may actually know. But with Altus, you can run it as containers in a host operating system with a Docker engine, and then to control it, it doesn't take a special app, it takes a browser. And so there's so much that we can do in browsers these days with regard to quick browser updates. We can have meters that move just as fast as you want them to. And that also means that with the browser, it actually works well, 10 feet away, 100 feet away, or 100 miles away. And of course, then there's the audio component too. You may be familiar. We brought out a Docker-based audio mixer some time back called IQ software, and it did not have an audio component to it. It was kind of meant to be used within the facility. Of course, Telos will be happy to sell you a codec too if you want to buy that and use it externally. Well, in Altus, we also incorporated WebRTC. Now, we incorporate it as an option because there's a fair amount of extra trouble to go to make it work. But you also now can do a full broadcast remotely through the same browser using WebRTC and Opus codecs. Oh, and also because this is not, the connection to your computer is not LiveWire and not AES67. It is, lower bit rate updates to the screen. You can go over public internet, over Wi-Fi and connections like that. So we'll look more at that in a few minutes. As I mentioned, an HTML browser. I don't even know why we say HTML5 browser anymore. That used to be a thing. In 2018, all browsers had HTML5, so I'm going to try to quit saying that. If you want to do a home studio, you don't need a purpose-built mixer to do that. Small studios, the computer you have now, will let you run a console. And here's a few pictures I snagged. Now that's the older IQS, but the idea is the same. This is my friend Big V at one of my stations in Mississippi. And so we can ask him to mix a second show while he's busy doing his show. This is in a studio that has a really old Axia Element console. It kind of looks like, remember Johnny Cash's One Piece at a Time, and it didn't cost me a dime, and he took the car home one lunchbox full at a time, basically. Yeah, well, that's what our console in that room looks like. Several different years of Axia consoles. Anyway, we're going to replace it with this because why spend money on hardware right there when, any computer will do. This guy, Mark Green, he can just, run the station literally from a computer he already has. Okay, let's focus on something else for a minute. Back to the idea of containers, containerized software. You're probably familiar with the Telos VX. There's a bunch of them here in New York. There's over 2,000 of them around the world, Telos VX on-air phone systems. Well, now we can put that in a container. And it does take some expertise to install, get it going. I mean, it's not just installing an app. There is a fair amount to it. But once you get it installed, it's like, rather than buy the server from us and have us install it, you're providing your own server and your own hardware. And by the way, how many of you have been using Microsoft Word for a while? Maybe you've been using Microsoft Word for, think about it, 20 years, 25 years. And I realize Word has had upgrades over the years, but you're probably using it on a different computer now than you were in 1997. Well, same thing, same idea with broadcast infrastructure, where you provide the hardware and then you buy or subscribe to the software. You get to, your investment continues on. If your Omnia 6 dies, well, your Omnia 6 died. We might be able to fix it. We might not be able to fix it. Depends on what's wrong. But if you subscribe to the software, we're going to keep that going and going and going. And if your commodity server dies, you can buy a new commodity server and install it on that. A broadcast IP intercom system, same thing. Rather than me I'm going to show you just a quick video here on what this can do. And again, it's container based.
First, we broke the matrix. Now we're putting intercom in the cloud. Telos Infinity Virtual Intercom Platform, VIP, is the first fully featured cloud-based intercom system. With VIP, you get sophisticated comms virtually, making cloud-based media production workflows available on any device, smartphone, laptop, desktop, or tablet. You can even use third-party control devices like Elgato's Stream Deck to control Telos Infinity VIP. Now, you can have Telos Infinity IP Intercom's award-winning performance, scalability, ease of integration, and cost efficiencies anywhere, at home, on-prem, site-to-site, or in the cloud. Telos Infinity VIP is cost-efficient, less maintenance, infrastructure, and space required, scalable, pay for only what you need. Easy to use, virtual panels on familiar devices like smartphones, tablets, and PCs. Infinity VIP gives you reliable, proven cloud workflows in real time. And with VIP, you get flexible deployment options and Telos Care Plus for premium service and support. Deploy Infinity VIP to suit your workflow on premises by installing Infinity VIP on your own server hardware or out of the box with the Infinity VIP server appliance. Alternatively, choose cloud deployment in a private data center or hosted by popular public cloud services. No matter which deployment you choose, you get the same convenient user experience. Infinity VIP also works with Infinity hardware panels and belt packs. It integrates with any other third-party intercom or AOIP network using AES67 or Simply 2110-30. Telos Infinity VIP. Sophisticated comms virtually.
I heard you showing the TV commercial was the quickest way to get that point across. So here's our title. Radio and IT, getting married, kids on the way, moving to a new house. And there's the house. Okay. The house would be a server and you can, move the stuff into it. All right. By the way, if you want to get yourself up to speed over several webinars on containers, specifically for broadcast, we cover a lot of the issues in Container University. It's a 6 or 7 part series. I should know, I did the whole thing. But if you snap, I'll show this at the end too, if you're interested. The QR code will take you to a landing page for Container University. All right. Containers are automatable, and that's what Greg wants to tell us right here.
Containers were designed to be the most easily automatable. And what does that mean? It means the supervision software notices that, hey, this particular server that was running, this in broadcast terms, this studio or, this mixer went offline. And they do this by constantly in real time. Essentially, it's very simplistic. It's like a fast ping, you know, are you there? Are you there? Are you there? And when it doesn't respond, it knows that it has the whole script of what needs to be running. It finds an available server, it runs that software, and you're back up again. This is how the world of the Googles and the Amazons and the banks and websites work. Things break, it automatically heals. So it's a lot of the same stuff that has always been done, but in an automatable and online, on the fly, replaceable way.
So just a few of the ideas, stuff mixing console, phone system, intercom, and there's more coming. Okay, so in this part, I've kind of given you a taste of the Container University. So if you're interested in that, like I said, 6-7 part series, anything from PTP timing, how to do that, how to do failovers, how we manage, what may be either in the cloud or in a private data center that maybe your company owns, or maybe in your own brick and mortar place that you are anyway. We're going to be introducing this at NAB, but more as importantly as the product, I'd like you to know about it. I've got some testimonials, which to me, these testimonials explain something a bit, not as much from an intellectual point of view, but from just a lifestyle and, continuing my job point of view, because we helped people keep their jobs during COVID, during bad landlord experiences, during the breakup of a morning show, and yet they wanted to stay together on the air. So that's what some of these stories are about. Big markets like Portland, Oregon, small markets also, San Luis Obispo, and Alva, Oklahoma. So those are all coming up here. So this is this new interface we've designed for an audio mixing console. Oh, as Don LaFontaine would say, in a world. Okay, we're engineers, so imagine a console featuring these features. Okay, the user interface has some interesting things. Program mix meters across the top, which is a change from our previous product. Context sensitive buttons. We actually don't show you buttons that don't apply, which is something you can't do in hardware. But if you've got a channel strip that you can't talk back to, well, we don't give you a talkback button, so you can't do it anyway. So that's kind of cool that in software we can, only present to you what you want to do. Easy drop down source selection. You literally touch that on the screen or click on it with your mouse, and you get the things that you could assign to that fader. Every fader has confidence metering. What's coming into that channel, if anything. The channel slider. We figured out that a person shouldn't have to target their finger or their mouse cursor on the actual knob. Why not just be able to touch anywhere on the fader and slide that up and down, right? Even if you're off the fader or off this, this part right here, you should be able to at least start on it and move, which is actually the same way we do the round knobs for monitor volume, headphone volume. Sure, start in the middle of it, but then you're dragging way to the left or way to the right to run the volume up and down. So we do that the same way. VX call controller, we put a 6-line call controller right there on there, and which only appears if your VX is part of your show. So that's kind of cool. One more on the user interface. Again, context sensitive buttons that only show up for things that you need. And there's some, you can adjust some things if you allow your users to do this. Your input gain, your balance, there's EQ available, kind of quasi-parametric EQ, and then dynamics control for de-essing and compression. Really works well for either a mouse or touchscreen. I've got a touchscreen at my office playing with this, and it works quite nicely with that. But the people that you're going to hear from in these testimonials, they're typically not using touchscreens. They didn't want the expense, so they just use a mouse. And something that surprised me. One guy tells me it's actually the boomer disc jockeys who have taken to this pretty easily and didn't really have a problem with it, which surprised him and me. So let me just move on here. Here, just a visual of what's going on. The software is not interesting at all from a compute point of view. It's just a bunch of Linux code, runs on your compute platform on-prem or in the cloud. What is interesting, of course, is the HTML that it presents to the users. In installation in the cloud or on premise, either one's fine. By the way, this can be accessed, I think, by up to 10 people at a time. So if you've got a morning show with people in different cities and each one wants to control, their own mic, that's not a problem. They can do that. The IP standards involve, of course, LiveWire Plus, and that includes LiveWire routing protocol and control protocol, but also does AES-67 multicast, AES-67 unicast. It'll certainly talk with Dante as long as you're using AES-67 in Dante, and it has SAP session announcement protocol for easier use with other protocols for advertising. It runs as a software container, as we looked at earlier. Same graphic. Let's move on. You purchase or subscribe to a base license, which has the basic console and 4 faders. But included are things like auto mix minus on each fader. Bus 4 is a multifunction bus. It does stereo program, as its program 4 would imply, but it also does a phone bus and a recording bus, which have different characteristics. But that our console's been doing that for years. It comes with 8 virtual auxiliary mixers, the VX 6-line controller, EQ, and mic processing. You can get additional 4 fader groups. You can also get this WebRTC, as I mentioned before. And integrating WebRTC, we've all been to websites that use WebRTC, Zoom and Google Meet, Microsoft Teams. I'm not sure if they use WebRTC, but you've been to sites that use that. I always thought this was an easy thing to do. I thought something plugged into the website and wham, bam, it just works. No, it's not that easy. There are additional servers involved, NAT traversal, turn or co-turn servers that help make that work. There's a lot more to it than I imagined. And so a lot of that is open source. In fact, you can do there are third-party WebRTC helper servers out there you can provide yourself, or you can let us install this code on your computer. And that's why it's an extra cost upgrade. And it can be purchased just to monitor. It can be purchased to monitor and one contributor, or it can be purchased to monitor and multiple contributors at the same time. Things that are roadmapped options coming up, mostly TV people have been asking, of course, for bus master faders. So you can turn a whole bus up and down. Whole bus audio processing. Customizable sends-on faders, and NDI network I/O. Purchase or subscribe, either model. It'd be interesting to hear from you, either after we talk here or sometime, how many people are interested or their company would rather have a buyout, and how many people would rather have this as OpEx. Was that the buyout? Buyout? Yeah. Okay. So we have some stories here, real users and real stories. This guy here, Jeff McGinley. So a lot of you know Tom McGinley. This is Tom's son, Jeff. Jeff worked for Telos for a while. His stations literally became homeless. They were kicked out of their existing studio space, and they could not yet move into their new studio space. They operated all their stations from transmitter sites and people's homes. This morning team ripped apart. And then this guy here, Werewolf. This is an awesome small town station. So let's hear from these people. I got to talk to Jeff McGinley, and he told me about the radio stations in Portland, Oregon. They got into a real pickle regarding their studio space. They had to move to a new location, and the new place wasn't ready to move in. In other words, they literally were homeless.
We're here to talk about a technical solution that you and Telos Alliance worked out. I think no person better to tell the story than you. So tell us what the problem was and tell us how you solved it.
So we decided to move out of a studio facility that we were in for 25 years. The infrastructure was old and the building was kind of falling apart. And so we found a new facility that we were going to move into. The problem is that we ran out of time to build the new facility before we had to be out and demoed of the old facility. And so it became a very quick 6-week crush to figure out how we were going to keep our 7 radio stations on the air here in Portland without really, built professional studios. And I reached out to Brian Jones, and he came by, and we had a very good talk about this. And I ended up handing him one of our new servers, and he came back with the VMs and the stacks all built for Altus. And we've been using that
now for about 2 months to keep all of our stations on the air.
If I understand correctly, Jeff, you've placed your station's automations, phone systems, and several Altus mixing consoles at a central location with easy yet secure remote access, and it so happens they have lots of good internet there.
It's a central location for all these various places around Portland that we have to broadcast from. We've got full control over that. Everyone can reach into it using a VPN. And so up there we have all of our main automation system, our ability to import media into the automation system, our main file server, the loggers, everything is up there and can be accessed remotely, including the Altus server that can actually be controlled remotely as well. It's up there in the central location.
And schematically, it looks like this at the transmitter site. They have servers that have their Altus mixing consoles. And then they have their playout systems. It's all connected audio over IP, hardware in and out to go to the air chain physically at the remote locations. And the reason it's drawn there with a console, just a little analog like a Behringer mixing console, because they typically would have talk shows, and they would have talk shows with several people, and they would all gather at somebody's house. This wasn't necessarily a COVID problem. This was a we're kicked out of our building problem. So it's just a lot easier for people, for the Jack and Joe sports talk show to show up at Jack's house, and everybody needs to hear each other in real time with no delay. So they have a little analog console, but then the analog console is hooked up back over here and feeding live via WebRTC. Typically, actually, on the same computer, they would run another browser screen that was their playout control for their automation system. Security is and should be on every engineer's mind. And Jeff says that while remote access security requires proper setup, it's been easy for authorized users to remote in and do their jobs.
We have a VPN client that we use that we enable, and then we log into, and it does two-factor authentication, and it connects so for the end user, it's very simple. All of the magic happens inside the firewalls to allow and the group policies to make sure that user has access to what it needs to, and that the firewalls are open and allowing all the traffic through that needs to. So for the end user, it's simple. It's really easy. For the networking team, the firewall team, for us just to make sure it's a little bit more complicated, but once it's up and running, it just runs. It just runs. We don't have to screw with it at all.
Now, Jeff Kingman and Jeremy West have been doing radio together since their college days, since 2006. They created a hugely popular morning show on KZOZ FM in San Luis Obispo, California. But in early 2022, the longtime friends had to plan their breakup, and Jeff picks up that story.
But what happened is Jeremy's wife got an awesome job offer in an area with a significantly lower cost of living that Jeremy just happens to like to live in. And we were going to either end the show or continue on. And that's where your guys' technologies fit in.
Yeah. So I talked to one of your engineers, and I told him what we wanted to do. And he said, well, I'm actually working on a project because of COVID where we could actually control the studio from your house. So it'll be a monitor, touch screen. And I said, well, that's exactly what we're looking for, because over the course of the 20 years Jeff and I have been working together, I run the board, and I wanted to make it as easy as possible to transition. So I was thinking, if I could control the studio just like I normally do, and Jeff could just show up and talk into a mic like he normally does, that would be the easiest. So now we're Jeff's still in the studio, so they're getting ready to do a contest. But so that's kind of what happened. So when Milos came up with this design and this product, I was like, yeah, we'll be your test dummies on this. And it's worked better than the console that we had in the studio, which I have to say is an antique and a relic from 2000-ish. So this thing does a lot more. It's easy to use. I bought a simple touchscreen monitor. And I control the studio from my house in Washington State.
Jeremy is pretty jazzed about his Altus console. In fact, we asked him if the Altus console was nicer than what he was using for 17 years. And I guess you know what he's going to say, because I'm showing you the clip.
Yeah, I got to tell you, it's a nicer console that I've been using for 17 years. A lot of times in radio, if it's not broken, you're not going to replace it. So we've been using, a console from 2001, and it was a great console back in the day, and it still works. And that console is still in the studio because, there's a few of the older DJs that prefer to use that over the touchscreen. The touchscreen goes right above it. Our engineers have wired this up so you can either go digital or analog. But it's an amazing console. I love it. I love the flexibility of it. It's made my job way more easier to accomplish every day. And I'm thankful that they came out with it. I remember talking to some of the engineers at Telos back when they were in the design phase of this, before they even had the actual prototype and what it would be able to do. And this thing has blown away my expectations of what we originally talked about. So I highly recommend it to anybody who wants to work from home.
Jeremy snagged a quick picture of his Alta setup in his home kitchen. There's a lot of clutter around there, so he didn't want that shown. So he just took a picture of the Alta. You can see it's got a lot more faders than what I had shown. All right, interesting name, Thane Conrocht, Irish name. He's a partner in Werewolf 97.5 KZLF. It's 50 kilowatt FM in Alva, Oklahoma. Small town radio for sure, but Thane and his partner are keeping costs low while making a solid impact in Alva and the surrounding counties. Now, one way they've kept expenses low and flexibility high is by using containerized software for their audio console and their phone system. And these guys are actually Cisco people. They're actually in the IT business. Radio's their hobby.
We do all of the studio work virtually as well through the use of newer products in the containerized world, where our mixer, our console is virtualized, as well as our phone system is virtualized, and we have nothing but microphones and touchscreens in the studio. It's pretty slick.
There's the studio right there, microphones and touchscreens and headphones. Now, of course, that's in wherever the studio is, but you can easily just duplicate that at home or some other studio or some other office.
Thane is obviously enthused about the benefits the station's getting from using this virtualized infrastructure. Here, Thane shares his thoughts on Axia virtual audio mixing.
Fantastic product. It's something we had wished when we had previous station use the IQ product in a physical form. This gives you the same functionality, but it's literally a virtual touchscreen, and just that easy. It can be pulled up anywhere. So we have a touchscreen in the studio that has nothing but that on it, and the other touchscreen has our playout system also virtualized. We just basically have essentially a VNC or a remote terminal into that playout system. So everything, if the studio were to crash and burn, lose power, we'd lose the mics, of course, but the station would still be fully on the air because all the guts, the software to produce the content and the software to mix the content is all virtualized in containers. It's really a wonderful system. The VXS, which is our phone system, is also a product that has transformed the way we take calls. We have a voice over IP system that has a PBX and a SIP trunk coming in from a provider that ingests that natively. So our call quality is incredible.
Too often we consider the latest technologies being only available to large broadcasters with big capital budgets. Thane says that's not the case with virtualized infrastructure like the Altus and Telos VXS.
For us and for many stations, especially the smaller operators, they will have the ability to get into some pretty amazing features, technology, and audio quality for a very, very low amount of money comparatively to if you look at conventional physical studio equipment that costs an enormous amount of money, thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars, that now you can have in a virtualized or in an IT-based format for significantly less money, but have that big city, that big station sound that everybody wants.
Most of us older on-air talent are used to real tangible faders, even rotary pots like I started with, maybe some of you did, to mix our shows. However, Altus is typically used with a touchscreen or with a mouse and just moving the cursor around. So I asked Jeff, how did your more seasoned talent do with their new operating surface?
I had some deep reservations about a few of my people that have been around and have used a lot of more analog technology, and I was pretty anxious to have them start using it. And those people have been the most reliable and have needed the least amount of hand holding and troubleshooting. They've really gotten to a point of just clicking and dragging a fader with a mouse or turning on and off the source. They picked it up within the first air shift, no problem.
This is the end of me showing you these technologies with the technology behind what we're doing here. So just you have 3 places where this is not even for sale yet, really. It's just appearing on the price list, but these 3 places are using this. If you want to snag the QR code for Container University, it does last a while, but obviously you can do it at your own pace. They're all videos. You can stop and start whenever you like. And mostly, I got to tell you, mostly these videos are me talking to experts. It's not me talking. It's me just, carrying you through, kind of like today's meeting. We have some, actually we have quite a few non-Telos people on these videos telling you about how they handle different issues with containerization in integrating that into broadcast facilities. And so with that, we're doing great on time.
We do have a question from the chat.
Yeah.
Bill, all the way in Green Bay, Wisconsin.
I couldn't find Time Power in your Apple Music.
Oh, you got to take a pill?
No, I couldn't find whatever song we were asking about.
Where are the playout servers physically located in Thane stations?
I get the feeling that they are off-site, but I actually don't know that. I don't know for sure. Because he said the place could burn down and they'd lose the mics and the computers that they use to mix audio. The interface, the user interface. But he said the stations would stay on the air. So I gathered from that his playout machines must be off-site, away from whatever the picture we saw. They must be out of that location, or not in there.
Follow-up question: can this run on a phone?
Yes, you can. Because what you're running is a web page, and I wish I had some screenshots I have screenshots of our IQS running on a phone, and it's a little small, but it also self-sizes. It's as you mentioned, Jeff, in my podcast, it's responsive. It doesn't try to put 16 faders on your phone. Now, you may have to scroll from one set of faders to another, and it does that. But you do have enough surface area to run a fader up and down and hit on-off buttons and run your monitor up and down. And with the WebRTC inclusion in Altus, you'll be able to listen on your phone. And hey, you can plug a decent audio interface into your phone and get Opus audio codec there for contribution. Okay, if you want to if you're on Zoom and you want to ask a question, unmute and ask your question. Not everybody at once. How about in the room here with this room full of amazing experts? Yes, sir, David Antoine.
Difference between Altus and the IQS virtual system. And second question, has anybody asked about crossfading on these virtual systems?
So like touching 2 things at once?
Yeah, I have jocks that we're jazz fans.
Yeah.
So you want to fade out of the ending song and bring in the next one.
So the first question, the difference between IQS and Altus. And IQS was our first containerized audio console. And IQS isn't going away because we also made that available on an appliance and called the AE1000. It's just a little one rack unit appliance. You can still buy it that way, but it was obvious that we were ending up with 2 different feature sets. The AE1000 is an ARM-based computing platform, and there's certain things we can't do easily on an ARM-based platform. WebRTC is one of them. But we could do it in an x86-based platform like you'd get running a container in Linux on an x86 machine. So we decided to reinvent the IQS, the software version, the container version, give it a new name, obviously different than IQS that you buy in the appliance. And so the slightly different screen layout, which is a better screen layout, I would argue, and it can do WebRTC. And we're not going to do any more work on IQS. Its feature set is fixed, except for bug fixes, it's fixed. IQS running on the AE1000 will never do WebRTC because it can't easily. What else? Yeah, you asked about, did that answer your question about the difference? Yeah, okay.
Hi, can you
Crossfading.
hear me? Oh,
Yeah, we'll get to you in just 1 second. I got one more question to answer. Multi-touch touchscreens. Now, if you're using a mouse and a cursor, you know, you're gonna have to go ahead and fade up the one you're gonna go to and start that song. You know, I don't know. I don't know. I guess if you got a live album, you might fade up as it comes in, but most songs, I mean, I've worked at jazz stations when I was a young boy. And you know, as one song was fading out, if it was a fade out song or the applause was fading out, we'd literally have the fader up and start the next song, and it would very naturally come in. I don't hear many people. I mean, it sounds weird to crossfade the intro for a song unless it's a live audience. Then you want to bring it up. You can't obviously start a live sound, a live audience making noise, coughing, applauding, whatever, from start. So with a multi-touch touchscreen, to answer your question, yes, you can operate 2, 3, 4, typically up to 10 things at once. You got 10 fingers. There's no point in making a touchscreen that handles more than 10. So like the one that I have a Dell touchscreen, which, by the way, word of warning, if you want to run your browser on a Mac and have the Dell touchscreen attached to your Mac and have the touchscreen work, you got to pay a third party an extra $120 because Dell doesn't do anything for Mac. So they have no driver that does that for a Mac. So you got to pay a third party in England. Ask me how I know. All right. Question from Zoom. Yes, go ahead.
hey, this is William. How you doing?
Good.
I had a question about how does the AWS setup required? Obviously, that guy that could have his house burned down had everything running on AWS. He had storage up there. He had remote automation. He had everything rolling so he could NDI in and out with his mics and get his consoles back from the AWS cloud. So his house could go down and lose his mics, but the station probably had a playlist and it would just go on. So the question is, how do you actually set up the AWS portion? I've looked into this and it's quite complicated with the compute and the EC2 and other things. Do you guys have a published guide that can help us old broadcast engineers figure out how to use this interface and then figure out how much that's going to actually cost in terms of compute time and how much resources are required, bandwidth in and out, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? Sorry, it's a long question.
That's a lot of questions. And no, you are hitting the nail right on the head. These are the questions that that people ask, that I ask, and that we have some answers to. I don't know that we have good published answers to everything. Now, you're right. AWS is complicated. I started to take some AWS practitioner classes myself, and I personally couldn't devote the time to it at that time. I've got to go back and do that again. And that doesn't make me an expert at implementing or installing or deploying containers in AWS. The good news is that at Telos, we do have 4 experts who are really good at this, and they've done it multiple times. And they've done it both in beta and in production. They got, we got people on the air now, not with Altus, that's brand new, but people using VXS in the cloud, using some new audio processing in the cloud, and using a lot of people using TV stations using VIP, which is the intercom platform. And so we're all engineers here. A year and a half ago, we published instructions on how to install IQS, which is that's console, didn't have WebRTC, but IQS on a Linux platform. We published very specific instructions and provided a script. Once the environment is ready, you run the script, and next thing you know, you've got 1, 2, 3, 6 consoles installed. I installed 6 consoles on literally a $600 off-lease Dell server at my house. I failed the first time, but the second time it worked fine because I didn't follow the directions the first time. Here's the sad secret at this point. It ain't easy. And making a mistake will result in it not working at all. And so we had to take a very tough decision, and that was to with rare exception, and Thane Conrock is one rare exception because that's what they do for a living. With rare exception, you need to hire Telos to install this for you, whether it's on your own hardware or whether it's in AWS. We're happy to do it and we're pretty quick about it, but we also know exactly what we're doing. Had a contract engineer friend of mine, good guy. I'd hire him to do antenna work and transmitter work and even build a studio, but he tried to install VXS and every point of instruction, he had an excuse. Well, we didn't install that Ubuntu. It was the one behind. Well, okay, that's fine. The files go in different places and I can't help that. That's Ubuntu. You'll have to talk to Linux about that. And Linus Torvalds is a little upset about that too, all the different distros. And then we also have to set up, some VLANs in the computer itself. Those require really specific nomenclature and setup. And the point is, as broadcast engineers, we're not up to this task entirely yet. And maybe someday we will be. And we can't even teach it in our 7 hours of Container University. I'm not telling you exactly how to install this stuff because it's involved. But you can certainly hire us to do it.
Thank you very much for that answer. Appreciate it.
Yeah, okay, me. But it's up to Conrad at this point. Was that a no? Oh, okay. All right, Jeff. One more. Oh, yes, sir.
There's many different types of monitors on the market. What would be, I guess, the specs of a monitor to use so that it's easy to see? Certain monitors may not react depending on the video card characteristics.
Yeah, our experience has been it's more to do with the speed of the computer that's running the browser. That I haven't run across. I mean, in the last couple of years, certainly, I haven't run across any monitors that seem laggy. Sure enough, I mean, I remember my days in the early 2000s that monitors could seem laggy. But today's monitors it's so cheap to build a monitor that makes gamers happy, right? If your computer makes a gamer happy, it'll be just fine for moving faders up and down. But good question. I mean, my radio stations, I've still got 15-year-old monitors hanging around that I probably, make sure they go in the sales department for. Yeah, exactly. What I'd like to conclude by saying is that, look, this isn't for everybody right now, but you need to have this on your radar that this is coming along. And, maybe next time you're changing some infrastructure in your broadcast facility, well, maybe you ought to think, is it time for me to do this? Or should I continue, screwing an appliance in a box? At Telos Alliance, many of the things we make nowadays just run on a computer inside. Sure, it's a tweaked Linux. Sure, we've carefully designed it with almost any manufacturer. They've designed the hardware or the software to work carefully with each other. And the idea of servers are commodity items. They're designed to all work the same because they're expected to. If I want to replace my Dell servers with HP servers, I ought to be able to do that. And the software and OSs shouldn't complain about that much at all. Otherwise, I'm not going to buy your different server. So these server companies, make this stuff to be very compatible with the OSs, and therefore they're not too different from each other. And so that's the idea. And I think we're in for, hey, I visited a TV facility today that almost every box in the rack was a computer with a label on it that said live view or something else, right? We're doing this now anyway. We're just looking at now doing this in a different way that we can fit a lot of functionality. And basically we can use the CPU cycles really heavy and hard, and get our money's worth, squeeze our money's worth out of that hardware. Thanks for your attention.
Thanks so much, Kirk, who flew in all the way from Music City, Nashville. One more time for Kirk Harnack. Also, the fine folks from Broadcaster General Store back there. I see Dave Kirsten, Shane Finch back there, who made it from Ocala, Florida, in. Tim Braddock, who drove from Maine to be here. Now, I don't use the word crazy often, but I'm not going to use it right now. But Well, appreciate you being here. Appreciate everybody being there. And also, Dave, did you want to say? Oh, there's pizza to go. And it's really good pizza, by the way. Those folks at home, this is the first time we did our own hybrid version. And it looked like it worked out really well. So we're going to have this on the website for people who missed it or just love Kirk so much they want to watch it again and again. And be sure to join us next month. We have Sage. We're going to be talking about alerting, and I believe that's going to be online. So we'll try to do as many in-persons as we can, but there'll still be some online as we slowly bring everybody back together again. Thanks again, everybody. Thanks for joining us. It's dinner time, and everybody have a good night.
Thanks for joining us. Please remember to subscribe to SBE 15 New York City.